What's up guys, Ryan here from Mud Gunner, and today I am joined by my buddy Mason, and we're going to be doing something a little bit different for this video. So Mason works with Independence Training, which is a local training company here in Arizona. They do medical, they do shooting, they did the IDARM event that I just did last month, which was awesome. They do a variety of stuff, and part of it is medical, which I think is very important. Us as gun people, not everyone, but a lot of us as gun people, we kind of neglect the medical side, myself included. For a long time, I wasn't very knowledgeable on the subject, and I'm no expert by any means, but I did take an Independence Training IFAC course, and it was pretty eye-opening. So that really got my foot in the door with medical. And my buddy Mason here, he helps Independence Training teach it, so I figured, why don't we do just a short video series where we talk about some of the key aspects of it. So we're going to break this up into about 3 videos and spread it out over the next couple weeks. But today's topic is going to be about tourniquets, and that's what we have Mason for. So I'm going to pass it off to you.
I am Mason. So the Stop the Bleed program is a new national program. It's kind of similar to the CPR programs that you've been seeing. The goal is essentially to make Stop the Bleed stuff as prevalent as CPR and AED training is to people. What Stop the Bleed is about, of course, is stopping the bleeding, right? So it kind of started in the military side of things a long time ago. I'm sure some people have heard of the Battle of the Black Sea, we would call it, or Operation Gothic Serpent. Most people would know of it as Black Hawk Down, the really cool movie with those actors that I can't remember for some reason.
I don't know the actors' names.
Orlando Bloom, Legolas.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, anyway, because of that real life event, unfortunately, a lot of special operations people, a lot of Rangers died. And after that, the Army kind of took a look at it and was like, man, what happened that all these professionals, all these like body killers and body slayers, we call them and stuff like that, were doing, that they died. So when they went back and looked at it, they discovered that a lot of it was because they were bleeding out. And back in the day, the medic was the only person really that would kind of treat major injuries. They didn't have what we have now, where we have individual first aid kits or IFACs, where every soldier, sailor, Marine, and airman is supposed to carry a medical kit. It wasn't like that back then, right?
I didn't even think about it that way.
Yeah, and this was early 90s. So it was one guy in a platoon. A platoon's usually, it just depends on what you do, but it can be up to 30 people or so. One dude in that whole group would have medical stuff, and it would be his job to fix people. That's how we did it in World War II and World War I and Vietnam, all those things.
Dang.
Well, they were like, hey, maybe we can save more people's lives if we teach everybody some basic stuff about how to do that. So they went ahead and did a lot of studies over the next 5 to 10 years, and they discovered that the 3 leading causes of preventable death in combat was massive hemorrhaging was number 1, right? And that's traumatic blood loss. That's a lot of bleeding, right? So they went ahead and kind of outsourced it to determine, like, hey, what are some things we can do to change this, to correct these issues? And so that's when tourniquets kind of didn't become tourniquets have been a thing for a long time, but that is when tourniquets really kind of came into their own. They did a lot more research on them, and they discovered that they don't have as much of a negative connotation as people believed before. It's still a really common thing. We get students in classes all the time. They're like, oh man, if you put a tourniquet on, you're gonna lose the limb. That's not actually how tourniquets work anymore. After studying thousands and thousands of tourniquet applications in combat from the military, we determined that that's not really how it works. There's a lot of little things that go into tourniquets, and we'll get into that as we go into it, but that's like a very brief overview of where the tactical combat casualty care, as you hear, or TCCC, came from. It came about as a result of the military. Now, since it became more prevalent in the military, they started doing studies, and they were like, hey, well, let's look and see what the 3 leading causes of preventable death are in the regular world. And shocker, it was the same, right? Yeah. The same 3 leading causes of preventable death, with massive hemorrhage being the first one. So there's an algorithm that we use to determine how we treat people, how we treat patients, right? And that algorithm is called MARCH. All right, MARCH stands for massive hemorrhage is your first one, right? Airway is your second one, which is the second leading cause of preventable death, an obstructed or broken airway. And then we do MARCH or R is respiration, so that's going to be breathing, things like CPR and stuff like that, right? And then circulation is C. Circulation is going to cover like minor bleeds, like you have cuts, where it's not like shooting blood out, things like that, right? That's gonna be covering your circulation. And then finally, H for hypothermia. When we teach IFAC classes like what Ryan took, we go into all of those things. We discuss the entire MARCH algorithm. For these next couple videos, we are only gonna be focusing on M for massive hemorrhage though, but just understand that's a small part of the entire process.
And it's a lot to learn too.
Yeah,
I took the course a couple of years ago, and like you remember key points, but you really can't remember it all just from one. Like that course was 8 hours. We ended up being there for 9 hours, which was awesome.
Yeah, we have a habit of doing that.
Yeah, no, it was great, especially for me being a noob with it. But in 9 hours, you learn a lot, but it's hard to retain all that if you're not constantly practicing it like what you do, or like just keeping up with it, because it's still a lot, just like guns. You can't just expect to know everything about a certain gun or how to shoot that gun with one range trip. It takes constant practice, I feel like.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's a perishable skill. Plus, medical stuff changes very rapidly, right? So when I first started teaching tourniquets, they were saying like, oh, you can have a tourniquet on a limb, fully occluding blood flow for like 10 to 12 hours before you have to worry about losing the limb potentially. Now that number is actually narrowed down. It's only 6 hours now is kind of the ideal time frame that you want to leave a tourniquet on, fully occluding wound. But that's only been in the last, I don't know, 5 years or so that they've started making some changes like that. So it always kind of is updating. A shameless plug for independence training for our company is that if you take one of our classes, any classes, I mean, obviously the gun stuff is cool and sexy, but we try and the medical stuff is actually more of our business now. If you take one of our classes, you can take that same class again at any point for 50% off. So if you pay the money to take an IFAC class and you want to do a refresher the next year or something, you only pay half price.
And refreshers are nice. And even just like, I'm looking at the tourniquet you have, and one thing I've learned just from taking the class and just learning even just a little bit, I see a lot of medical stuff set up wrong, or tourniquets set up wrong. Like one thing is I always see this part, what is this exact piece called? Just
so that's the U-clip for it. That's just a strap to retain the windlass.
So I've seen a lot of these come through the store where it's fully covered like this.
Yes, absolutely.
And some of them, like occasionally we buy tourniquets at our store, and I've taken them for like training, but sometimes if you leave these on too long, I've seen it get stuck to where you couldn't even get it off.
Yeah.
So I've seen just in the few years since I've been at the store and took your class, a lot of tourniquets that are just not usable because people stored them wrong. So
little things, yeah. I mean, plus little things like that start adding up when you're talking about time, right?
Yeah.
Massive hemorrhaging, the reason it's number one in the March algorithm is because it is what will kill you fastest, right? We're not talking about, I cut my arm and there's a little bit of blood dripping out. You will know when it is massive hemorrhage because there's a couple signs to look for, right? There's pooling, squirting, and soaking are the big things that you're looking for. So if you get a cut and it is soaking through your clothing, that's a big indicator that it is a massive hemorrhage. You'll see it in movies and stuff. It's very exaggerated, but someone will like shoot blood out. It's not quite that crazy, but it does pump out, and you can see it. We use training materials in our videos that show what happens in traumatic bleeds, and it can actually pump out pretty rapidly. So those are the signs you're looking for: pooling, squirting, and soaking, things like that in the clothing and on people's bodies. Otherwise, it can be covered under a different step of March, which would be circulation. Right?
Okay.
So if you notice some kind of bleeding like that, what I like to do is, when I teach classes, I just have people put the tourniquets on before I explain to them in detail how to put it on. This is a video to teach people how to put tourniquets on, so it works a little bit differently. But the way it's set up and everything matters. But not to get too far away from what I normally do, I'm just going to show you guys how to put it on first, and then I'll talk about how to set it up. It's easier to do it that way, I think.
Yeah.
So
go for it. So whatever you need.
If you're going to do a big thing people don't think about often too is like, who am I putting the tourniquet on? Sometimes you're the patient, right? And so you have to be able to apply these tourniquets to yourself. And then, of course, you have to be able to apply them to other people, but also who are the people in my life that I spend the most time with? Because chances are those would be the people you'd have to do some kind of medical intervention to, right? Obviously, we do it to plenty of random people too, but that's kind of a personal choice. Depends on how dangerous your life is. So if you're going to put the tourniquet on, it'll open up and make a nice complete circle like this, right? So because we had it staged the way that it was staged, this is how it's going to open up, and I'll show you guys how to do that once we're done. Now, I'll just do self-application first because that's a little quicker.
Okay.
So you want to take it with the red tab facing outwards, and let's say my left arm is the one where the bleed is. Now, there's two different ways to apply a tourniquet. There's a hasty tourniquet, right, which is just going to be, I see a ton of blood, I don't know exactly where it's coming from, so I need to get the tourniquet on as quickly as possible. And so in that case, you're going to apply the tourniquet as high and tight on the limb as you can get it, right? So if you see a ton of blood on an arm and you're not 100% sure exactly where the bleeding is, you will put the tourniquet as high on the limb as you can get it. If you know where the bleeding is, if I can see that it's coming from here, then you want to do 2 to 3 inches above the wound, but not over a joint. So if I have a cut right here, you can't put a tourniquet over your elbow or it will not work properly. It compresses muscle groups, right? So you need to get it over muscle groups. So if my wound is right here, I would go 2 to 3 inches above, and then I have to go above a joint and do it there. The reason we do that is so that if it does have to be on for a prolonged period of time, you're essentially saving more of the limb by doing it that way, right? So if I put it on like this and left it for 6 hours, whole arm might have to go potentially, maybe, right? But if I do it here for a cut that's down here, then I might only lose.
Yeah, I mean, it's more important to protect what you can versus lose everything or lose your whole life.
Yeah, you hear a lot of people like, well, I don't want to lose an arm. Well, you don't put a tourniquet on, you'll die. So you know, it's kind of a toss-up for people. So once you get it on as high as you can, next you're going to grab the red tab, Probably the most important part of tourniquet application is initial tightness, right? So it is how tight you get the tourniquet right now, and this is probably the biggest mistake I see people make when they apply them, is they'll take the tourniquet and they'll like set them on their limbs gently. No, you need to be very tough. You need to put as much tension and pressure on the tourniquet as you possibly can in this first phase, right? Because that means that when you go to start cranking on the windlass, which is the next step, you're going to have to do less turns to get more occlusion on the wound.
This is the windlass, right?
Yes, sorry, this is the windlass right here. So now I'm going to turn the windlass. I've done this to myself too many times probably, so I'm not going to give it a ton of turns. But what I will do is give it one turn, and for the purposes of this, that's a half revolution. So I like to do this though because of my beautiful alabaster skin, you can immediately already see a change in color, right? This is not fully occluded though. I can still move my fingers and have manual dexterity. When it is fully occluded, you would not be able to move this arm around, right? Because it's completely blocking all the blood that goes to your hydraulic system, so you wouldn't be able to move your arm. But you can already tell, again, that I'm losing a little bit of coloration in here, right? And then you can test it by capillary refill. So essentially when blood's not flowing properly to a limb, it takes longer for color to come back into your cuticles, basically, than it does if you aren't. So once you have that, and you got it nice and tight, you're gonna turn this windlass until the bleeding stops, all right? There's no set number of turns. It's until the bleeding is fully occluded, until it completely stops bleeding. Now, on average, they're finding it's like 3 to 5 turns. If you guys get into this and start doing this stuff, which I highly encourage you to do, I would at least once put it on all the way and see how many turns you can get so you know how painful this is. A really good friend of mine is a pararescueman in the Air Force, which is like Air Force Special Operations. They do medical stuff. And he said that the majority of the times he has applied tourniquets in combat situations, the actual application of the tourniquet has hurt worse than the wound that people have suffered. But unfortunately, it's either that or you die, right? And you need to explain that to people as you're putting it on. So once I got it tight, you lock it into the U-clip right here so you see it's not going anywhere. But now we have all this extra tab, and understand this is just Velcro. So if I leave this tab out here like this and I need to move somebody to an
and it gets caught, it's going to loosen.
It's going to undo all that hard work that I just did. So what you want to do is take the rest of the extra, go through the U-clip to get it out of the way. You can either wrap it around again and do the same thing to get it out of the way, or you can go back through after you go over the windlass and do that. And then the very last step of your tourniquet application is to throw that tab over there. That just prevents it from coming off easy. These are training tourniquets, guys. We've used them hundreds and hundreds of times, so the Velcro is a little bit looser, but understand that will help. Make sure it doesn't get done. Now, if you're in like you can see a lot of difference there now, so
yeah.
I'm gonna go ahead and undo that.
Yeah, and that was only a half turn. That wasn't even a full turn, but
yeah.
You need multiple turns to actually cut the blood flow off. So
yep, and that'll depend, of course, everything's very situationally dependent, like I kind of in anything medical and shooting for the most part, situation dictates a lot of this stuff. If someone's got bigger arms with more muscle, it might be less turns for them to do it. If they have tiny arms and less muscle, it might take more turns for them to do it. Legs and stuff like that are going to take more or less turns depending on the kind of person that you're dealing with here.
And would you recommend to have a training tourniquet so you could do stuff like this and just a one that you keep clean and new?
Yeah, absolutely. So tourniquets are disposable items, guys. They're not actually designed for you to use them multiple times. Now, you'll see we annotated training on this tourniquet just kind of as a way, so we obviously...
It looks like it would still work, though.
Yeah, this tourniquet would absolutely still work. But like I said, we've used these hundreds and hundreds of times. There are different color-coded tourniquets that have different meanings and stuff. I was going to kind of get into that a little bit more towards the end after we apply this. But that's your basic application of the tourniquet, guys. Now, one difference when we apply tourniquets to legs, let me get it back to where it was before, and then I'll show you how to stage them. So let's say you got a tourniquet like this. There's a wound on your leg. Something important to remember is people carry stuff in their pockets, guys. A lot of people carry things. So if you're going to put a tourniquet on a leg or an arm for whatever reason, you have to get the stuff out of the person's pockets because if it's in there, it may not be able to compress the muscle groups properly.
Yeah.
So like all your EDC pocket dumps.
And I could picture you don't want to break your phone in your pocket and have the what is it, the lithium light on fire while
that'd be great.
You're bleeding and your phone lights on fire.
Then we get to treat burns too.
Yeah.
Great, that'd be awesome. So get the stuff out of the pockets. Another reason to do that, of course, is like, man, if it's a stranger I'm doing this to and they're like knocked out and I go to put a tourniquet on them and they wake up and stab me with a knife because they just see a dude hurting them or something, that could be bad potentially too. So that's more of a scene safety thing, which is another huge part of all of this training that we don't really have time to get into in a compressed format. But
yeah, make sure you're safe too. It's not worth your life to try to save someone else.
Now, the only difference when you apply it to a leg versus an arm is that instead of trying to like hop on my wounded leg and get the tourniquet through there, which is not very realistic, especially if you are actively bleeding from your leg, you undo it all the way. So you just get it down to a strap, and then it's much easier for you to do this. Now, the nice thing is, too, if someone's like pinned in a car crash or something like that, which, We spend most of our time in cars as adult Americans, right?
Yeah.
So car accidents happen, right? So if someone's pinned or like knocked under their leg, you can't get the tourniquet around the traditional way, but this way you can still scoot it in there. An easy way, of course, too, to make sure it's nice and high and tight. Floss it up, get it where it needs to go, and then you just connect it. Now, you'll notice, though, that I have the red tab again facing outwards, because if I had it here, it's a lot harder for me to pull it tight this way.
Especially if you're sitting on it.
Yeah, and it's the same thing with arms, too. If I put it that way, it's really hard for me to get good tension on it pulling that way. But with legs, man, it's super easy to get a lot of tension on it because you can use both hands. And you can really get down on that. And now that, so you'll notice I don't have huge legs. I mean, they're pretty nice, but they're not. But it still doesn't, I can't wrap it around because there's not enough material, right? It happens. So now I'll give it one turn. Oh, that's nothing. We'll do one more here. All right. Same thing. So when a tourniquet is applied properly, especially on a big thing like this, I can't actually put my weight on my leg right now, because if I do, I would fall over because all my muscle groups are compressed, so I can't really like move my leg very well.
Yeah.
But it's the same process, right? So now that I did have it sealed up and locked in the U-clip, put that tab over there, and you're good. If you guys are out somewhere like off-roading, if you guys do that, or you're out hunting and it's gonna be a long time before you can get somebody to you, you could also throw a thing of duct tape across this just to make sure that it's not gonna get snagged on anything.
Especially if you're moving and that Velcro comes undone.
Yeah, and if you're alone, especially, and you have to drag yourself through the bush now to get somewhere they can find you, put a thing of dynamic combat medical tape, which is just duct tape, around your leg, right? And that'll help you out. So that's really the only difference for a leg application. So let me pop this bad boy off, and I will show you guys the proper way to stage them.
And then real fast, because you talked about cars and people, I've seen plenty of accidents even just living here in Arizona, so it happens all the time. I think proper storage of it in your car or on your person is important too, because if you have it in a backpack in your trunk, but you're pinned in your car, I mean, that doesn't do you any good.
Yeah, exactly. We're going to do a whole thing on that too, actually. One of our videos will be about the equipment and where to put it and how to carry it.
So in my head, like just talking to you about it or just seeing this, I would probably store it somewhere like center console or have some type of medical center console, because I mean, ideally, whether you're passenger or driver, you can get to your center console.
Yeah, so I brought my vehicle kit, and I'll definitely break it out. One of the place that I put it that's not different, but it's kind of what all the instructors do, a headrest.
Okay.
And it's not just like hung over my headrest, so if I get in an accident, it'll shoot off if the car rolls or whatever.
Like a Molly headrest maybe or something?
You could do a Molly headrest, but you want to be able to take it off if the car's upside down or something like that, right?
Got it.
So if you're going to do a Molly thing, you want it to be a rip-away kind of IFAC. Mine is literally just clipped to my headrest, so all I have to do is unclip it. And the nice thing about it, too, the way I have it set up is I can wear it as a fanny pack.
Okay.
If it's me responding to somebody else who's injured, I can just clip it on as a fanny pack, and now all my med stuff is right here. Fanny packs are also cool now. They're making a comeback again. You guys didn't know that, so it's cool to have them back again. So yeah, I mean, that's a couple ways. And like I said before, we'll do a whole video on the kits and stuff, and I'll break out my vehicle kit and everything.
Cool.
So staging the tourniquet.
You can get closer on this one if you want.
Oh, yeah. First thing you want to do, you want to make sure you get any looseness out of the tourniquet. So just kind of pull it, make sure it's tight. Now, you're going to take the red piece, insert it through the buckle. You're going to want to pull it through the buckle about 6 inches or just past the logo. I've found teaching a lot of these classes that every man in the U.S. has a different definition of what 6 inches is. So just go past the...
And I don't know if we mentioned, this is a cat tourniquet.
Yeah. I'll do that towards the end, too.
Okay.
I mention it because, yeah, there's a couple different kinds. So once you do that, you'll fold it back over. Now, nice easy loop, right? Pretty simple so far. Yeah. I promise you it seems simple, and you might be looking at me like, this guy's crazy. Why is he taking so much time to do this? People always screw this up in classes, 100% of the time. I show people very slow, very deliberately, and they forget what I did. So now that you have it like this and it's a loop, you want to grab it by the U-clip. I like to pretend it's a neat little tie, just like that, right? Now, you'll see that underneath this red tab, there's a bunch of extra hook Velcro. You don't want that exposed because it will catch on anything, right? So you're just going to take that extra piece and fold it under. It's a special kind of hook and loop, so it will adhere to itself. So now that that's out of the way, you just do one more fold at the buckle right here, and then boom, to do this. Now, like Ryan mentioned at the beginning, you'll see a lot of people do stuff like this. Do not stage your tourniquets like that, all right? Leave this little loop open, because when you are under pressure, and I promise you that if you are actively bleeding enough that you're putting a tourniquet on, you will be under a lot of pressure. It can be hard to do stuff like this if you don't train to do it all the time, right? And I do this as a living, teach people and put tourniquets on and things like that. But your average person isn't expected to do this 10,000 times to build muscle memory to pull a little tab off, right? So just make it simple for yourself. leave the tab here.
Well, and the thing that worried me is one of these came to our store, and I was like, oh, an extra tourniquet for me to train with. This was over, and it was so sealed, I had to take a knife to separate it because it was like glued or whatever.
That's some high quality hook and loop Velcro right there.
Or yeah, in my head I was like, maybe it just melted in their car, but I had to take a knife to separate this, so that was a useless tourniquet at that point.
Yeah, that wouldn't be good. Maybe still some training, but yeah, you can't flip it open. So you're probably thinking like, man, why does it matter that you stage the tourniquet this way? What's the big deal? So one of the reasons that they, by the way, when you buy them brand new, they will come staged that way. They'll be wrapped in plastic. Take the plastic off, but they'll come staged that way. So now if I take this tourniquet and I put my hand through the first loop, so the red tab's facing downwards, and I do this, it is now a perfect loop for me to apply it to my arm. So it just makes it faster for you to apply it, right? And if you do the same thing every time, always the same way, it gets a lot easier for you to do it quickly and under stress. So one more time, at combat speed, so to speak, stretch it out, run the buckle through just past the label, make a neat little tie, get rid of all the excess, fold it in half once, nice and flat, pretty compact package, easy to carry. You can put this in a pocket and not look super crazy walking down the street with like whatever slung across you, and it's not too bad. But they're pretty convenient, pretty easy to go down there. So like Ryan said, I suppose then we'll get into the different types of tourniquets. This is a CAT tourniquet, Combat Application Tourniquet by North American Rescue, all right, NAR. North American Rescue is the only company that is authorized to import these into the United States. So they're very high quality, very well made. These tourniquets have literally saved thousands of U.S. soldiers in the course of the global war on terror. We spent 20 years fighting in various locations, and these tourniquets have been there with us the whole time saving people, right? There are different colors of the tourniquets that they come in. There's 3 primary colors that you'll find them in. Black, of course, is the tactical dynamic military color of the tourniquet. But I'm not in the military anymore, right? So I don't need super cool tactical tourniquets. So we usually, when we sell kits, we recommend people get the bright orange tourniquet because it's a lot easier for me to say, hey, go grab the bright orange thing in my kit than it is for me to say, go grab the black tourniquet in my tactical kit full of other black implements that do all this cool dynamic stuff, right? So if you're not kicking doors in, shooting bad guys in the face, orange tourniquets are the way to go, right? They also make blue tourniquets like this. Blue for NAR annotates training. It annotates it as a training tourniquet. There is actually no difference, though, between the two. They just picked blue as a training color. So you can still use these as the real ones, but remember, if you get a training tourniquet specifically for training, write somewhere on Sharpie that it's for training, and that's the one you reuse. You wouldn't want to use your real tourniquet over and over again to train.
Yeah.
So generally buy about 2 of these if I could make a recommendation.
Yeah.
There are a couple other brands for tourniquets. The next most popular one that has real life saves and was used in combat all throughout the Middle East is this one. This is a SWAT T wide tourniquet, right? So you'll see it's nylon. There's no loop Velcro on this. It uses a tension bar like this to tighten it down. These are still pretty easy to apply. I prefer the CATs by NAR because of the Velcro. These are a little bit harder to self-apply, and I'll show you what I mean. Because it uses a friction adapter, friction buckle, to tighten it down, you have to
basically crank on it.
Crank on it, move it back and forth like that to get. Now it gets real tight, right? It's real good, and it's easy to apply on another person. But in a stressful situation, when it's just you applying it to yourself, it's just a little slower in my opinion. But if you get these and train with them all the time, obviously it'll be the same. The nice thing about them and what people like is that the windlass is metal, right? You're not really supposed to reuse any tourniquets, but if I was going to have to reuse a tourniquet over and over again, this would be the one because it's a nice metal windlass. The problem, of course, is that once you start cranking the windlass down, their method of locking it down is this little D-ring right here, and so you have to kind of fish the windlass into the D-ring to really get it secure, which is semi-easy here, not that easy, but in the field, not quite as fast, so you really got to train with it. You can actually break them down too, like the CATs though, so if you need to do a leg application, there's just a nice little buckle there that snaps down. So this is the second most popular one, and this is probably the second most real-life saves of a tourniquet, I would say. I don't actually have the data on that, so don't quote me on that, but it's CATs definitely first, and then this is probably second. And then there's also a TMT tourniquet, right? These are relatively new, but we found them to be pretty nice. It's essentially like if a soft T wide and a CAT tourniquet got together and had a baby. This is what it would be because it combines elements of both. It's wider than the CAT tourniquet is. It's got a plastic windlass still, but it's a little different ergonomics. The way that it locks in is a little different. Style clip right there. And then it also combines some elements from the soft to wide, and that you can split it apart like that to make it easier. So these aren't bad. These are good. We've been using these for a little while, but they're not going to have nearly as many real life saves as the soft to wide and the cat tourniquet are.
Okay.
So, as a general rule, I would just recommend sticking with the cats. Cats will be more prevalent too because the official Stop the Bleed program that all this stuff is based off of, the U.S. government that is kind of pushing for this thing, which normally the government pushes for something, I don't want it, but this time it's actually pretty good. Is that cats are the official tourniquet of that, right? So you'll find these in
yeah. Well, that and like even just holsters or the pouches for them. I noticed they're all for cat tourniquets.
Yeah. It's gonna be a lot easier to find them too, for sure. One of the goals of this program that's kind of cool is that they want it to be as popular and prevalent as CPR and AED, and so part of that is that they're actually making Stop the Bleed kits, like public kits. I'm sure if you guys have seen AEDs before in public, right? The goal now is that there will be Stop the Bleed kits up on the wall next to AEDs.
And what does AED stand for?
Sorry, automated external defibrillator.
Okay.
Right?
See, I didn't know that.
Yeah, sorry. On AED,
You're
it's
good.
like for CPR and stuff. When you,
Got it.
It'll shock it if your heart has a rhythm that can shock and bring you back.
They don't teach us this in school. This is the stuff we should be learning.
It's not. That's like a whole video too, CPR AED, because there's some stuff about that that's kind of BS too.
Okay.
It's not like the movies where if they have no rhythm, like you see in movies when now you can tell everybody when you see it in movies that it's BS. When it's doing boop, a solid tone, and then they shock them, it doesn't work that way.
Okay.
If there's no tone, an AED is not going to be able to fix them. What an AED can do is correct an irregular rhythm, an electric rhythm in the heart, right? So if there still has to be something though, but in movies when you hear that beep, solid tone, they can't shock that and bring that back. It doesn't work that way, right? So.
Okay.
Yeah,
See, I didn't know that.
Call BS on that kind of stuff. I watch too much Grey's Anatomy, so I do that thing all the time.
And then on a side note, I don't know if you're going to talk about this or not. One thing with cats is there is a lot of fakes. So.
Oh yeah.
As someone that can order these through our distributors, if it's less than $25, it's probably fake. Our dealer cost is over 20. Let me just put it that way. So, they're about $30 on average from what I've seen.
From NAR, straight on their website, I think they're $31.99 or something.
It's worth it.
If you get on Amazon and you see cat tourniquets for it's
$18.
$18, it's not real.
No,
right?
it's fake.
Or it's very old, right? Because they've gone through a lot of different iterations. I kind of didn't mention that. I guess I should, but these are all Gen 7 cat tourniquets. That is the current generation of cat tourniquets. What makes it a Gen 7 is that they really beefed up the windlass and made it a lot thicker than the other ones.
Okay.
If you have older generation cat tourniquets, as long as they weren't used for training, they're still valid tourniquets, right? They just, as anything, they make improvements as they go, right? And so Gen 7 is the current iteration of cats. You'll find Gen 5 tourniquets are really prevalent too, because that's what the military bought millions of these tourniquets, right? So you'll still see them, especially in surplus stores. They're still good and fine to use as long as they're in good condition. But yeah, make sure you get real ones.
Yes.
There's a lot of you'll see airsofters and stuff, the LARPing, whatever they call it, which I do all the time because it's really cool.
Yeah, it's cool.
But you'll see people buy these things just for costumes. And so Chinese companies want to make money too. And so they make Chinese copies of cats that these airsoft kids can throw on their vests to look cool.
And it makes sense for a young kid.
Right,
yeah.
That's fine. But understand they will not work in real life. We have done many tests on that. I think we even have a YouTube video about it where we took some fake ones and we cranked down on them and they shatter almost every time, right?
Wow.
Something else I guess I can brush on pretty briefly is improvised tourniquets.
Belts.
So, oh man, that's it right there, right? So that's the first thing people say when I'm like, what's an improvised tourniquet? They're like, come on, just use my belt. Belts have never actually worked as tourniquets to save a single actual life. Maybe one, I think, maybe. If you have an older relative that's like, I just used a belt when I had a traumatic bleed in my leg and it saved my life. They didn't have a traumatic bleed.
Hacksaw Ridge, he used a tourniquet in one of the opening scenes. It's a great movie, but I'm after taking your course and watching that movie, I was like,
Because with a belt, you'd have to constantly hold pressure on it yourself, right? Which as you're bleeding out, it's not like in the movies too, where people are good, they're fully functional, they're bleeding out, and then they die. Mm-hmm. Every millisecond that you're bleeding, you are actively losing capability, right? Mm-hmm. So the longer you're going with the bleed, the less you're going to be able to function properly, right? So belts actually make terrible, terrible tourniquets. Improvised tourniquets fail something like 90% of the time that they're used. Mm-hmm. So understand it's not a winning strategy. I'll just improvise. You should have purpose-built tools.
Spend the $30.
Right, spend $30 to get. Even if you're only ever going to buy one, I don't care. Buy one real one for $30 and buy some Chinese ones to train with, and mark them as different. But buy purpose-built tools, right? Because improvised tourniquets not great. If you have no other option whatsoever, you can make improvised tourniquets, right? You want to make sure that the material you're going to use as the actual tourniquet itself is at least an inch wide. Anything like shoelaces, people say, oh, I'll use my shoelaces.
You're going to break it.
One, it will not work very well, if at all. Two, you might break the shoelaces in addition to that, but also you're going to cause a ton of nerve damage to the limb when you put it on because it's so narrow and there's so much pressure going through it to actually stop a bleed. So it needs to be at least 1 inch thick, preferably 2 inches, right? If you can get it, like these, TMT's about 2 inches. And then you need to find something to use as a windlass. Remember the plastic or metal piece I talked about on these other tourniquets?
Which this, to me, I'm trying to think what I would personally use.
Like people are like, I'll use a stick on the ground. Why is a stick on the ground?
Yeah, it's
Because
just
it's dead.
the
Right?
convenience
It's not gonna
of just
last.
having that if you spend the $30 and
Yeah. Now, some things you can use. Pocket knife, yeah, you could use that if you need to. Now, don't unfold it and use it because then you're just going to cut yourself, right? So use it, fold it up. You would just tie your fabric around it. You can use this as a pretty effective windlass. I always carry a little pocket flashlight with me. This would be a great windlass. A pen, no, because it'll probably
plastic.
break unless you carry like some super tactical titanium pen with a gun built into it or
It's not a pen, but this, although you can't poke yourself and make you bleed even more, but this would be perfect if it wasn't so sharp.
You could, yeah, that'd be better, a better alternative certainly, but that's also like, what, metal or polymer?
It's metal.
Yeah, so it's not going to break, certainly, right? So you want to look for things that aren't going to break. Don't use sticks on the ground.
Yeah.
As a general rule, man, just don't improvise tourniquets. Buy a real one and carry it. So there's a lot of different ways to carry tourniquets, guys. There's like tactical kits that have tourniquets. There's vehicle kits that we used to have tourniquets. There's kits I carry on my person everywhere I go that don't make me look like a tool.
Yeah.
Too. They are a thing, and we'll talk about that in the video that we're going to do for it specifically. But just keep in mind there's a lot of ways to carry. They're easy to get. Stop the bleed training is easy to find now too, guys. It's everywhere, all across the United States.
And it's free a lot of times, right? Like,
yeah, so we, independence training that is, we do a free Stop the Bleed class the second Saturday of every month. Actually, tomorrow we're doing a free, Saturday tomorrow? Yes, tomorrow we're doing a free Stop the Bleed class. Obviously, those are going to be in Arizona, though, so if you don't live in Arizona,
check your state.
You're SOL. But we also do another one on Tuesday nights now. Maybe there might be Thursday nights here in this office.
And
too, so.
Stop the Bleed is about 4 hours, right?
2 hours.
2 hours.
There's only 2
Where
hours.
if you sign up for their actual IFAC course, it was
8
about
hours.
8 hours.
Yeah,
And
so if you guys
learn
are
a
local
lot.
to Phoenix, then definitely hit us up. We do a free one second Saturday every month in Mesa, and then we do one here at our office in Tempe. That's either second or third Thursday every month. Not 100% sure on that, but you can check on our website.
You can find them whatever state you live in, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And there'll be plenty of other companies that do it, guys. There's other really awesome trainers that teach medical stuff. You kind of mentioned at the beginning, right? Like, I carry all these guns and collect all these guns and stuff. If you're going to carry a tool, guns are tools, right?
Yeah.
But it is a tool that can potentially kill people, right? Then you should also have the skills to fix that.
Yeah.
Right. Also, from an instructor standpoint, we started out teaching firearm stuff. It was a big thing, right? We've taught thousands and thousands of students how to defend themselves properly with handguns and with rifles. We have had students use those skills and be like, hey guys, really glad I took your training. An incident happened. I won. I'm still here because of the training I took from you. That's awesome. We'd love to hear that. But that's very rare. Maybe like 100 times out of 10,000 something students, or more than 10,000 students, but maybe 100 times out of the whole 14 something years we've been a company. Medical stuff though, every single time we teach a class, we have 2 or 3 people from that class hit us up within a month or 2 months saying, hey, I witnessed a vehicle accident on the side of the road. I pulled over, and because of the training I took with you guys, I knew what to do and I helped somebody. Or even something simple as like, hey, my kid injured themselves at the park, and I know if I hadn't done your training, I would have freaked out and lost it. But because I did, I could evaluate the situation, and I knew it wasn't life-threatening, and I was much more calm than I would be. Seek medical training. If you guys are only going to take one class in your life, which would be stupid, but if you're only going to take one class in your life, I'd make it a medical class. Make it a basic.
You're more likely to use medical than you are a firearm.
Guns are cool, and it is sexy to go out and shoot things and do this dynamic stuff, but you are infinitely more. I would almost say that you're guaranteed at some point in your life to need medical training. The chances of you actually having to smoke somebody in self-defense in the United States, depending, as long as you don't live in like Chicago or LA or something like that, are pretty low, right? So just keep that stuff in mind and be realistic about what you're planning for.
It's also easy to travel with. I went to Greece last year. I traveled with a full IFAC and a medical kit. I was like, that's cool. Trauma shears and everything. Trauma shears are like scissors, but they're for cutting clothes. But yeah, just throw an IFAC and a first aid kit in my suitcase, and I was able to go to Greece with no problem. Can't take a knife, can't take a gun, but at least I have a way to stop bleeding if it happens. So
yeah, absolutely. It's really easy to get the stuff and carry, guys. There's a couple websites I can recommend to buy stuff from. I don't know, that might be the gear video, but just in case you're only going to watch this one video, not the gear video, Cat Tourniquets, NorthAmericanRescue.com. Obviously, great place to get them. They're usually always out of stock because NAR supplies the entire United States military with cat tourniquets. The Tactical Medic, is a store down in Mesa, Arizona, but he has an online store as well. That's where we get a lot of our stuff from. Sean's a really cool dude.
We can order them when they're available. I'd have to double check. It's just hit or miss, but our shop, Arizona Firearms, can also order them.
Oh, okay, sweet. Yeah. Awesome.
Specifically the tourniquets, not full-on medical kits.
Not yet, I can help you with that.
Yes.
So yeah, that's NAR and the Tactical Medic are great places to get them. Like I said, guys, be wary of buying things like that on Amazon. There are a couple.
Yep.
You can get things on Amazon, like the Tactical Medic has a presence there, but then you'd also see that it's the Tactical Medic. So just vet your sources that you're getting these things from. If you go to buy cat tourniquets, like Ryan said,
if it's under 20 bucks, it's
18
fake.
bucks, whatever. Or if you see some other tourniquet that's not a North American Rescue Cat tourniquet, a soft TOI tourniquet, or a TMT tourniquet, don't buy it. Just stick with the ones that are good. There's one particular tourniquet that comes to mind. I don't want to trash talk them too much, but some people like them, some people don't. Rats tourniquets, terrible tourniquets, do not work very well at all.
I've heard that, but I have no personal experience
We
with
did
it.
some testing on them, and we took a pulse ox and registered, the pulse and stuff in people's limbs after we put them on. Does not stop traumatic bleeding, right? Just, everyone's trying to get their piece of the pie.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't recommend those.
Cool. Well, thank you for talking about this. And like I said, stay tuned. I'm not going to layer them all together. We're going to split this up over a couple weeks. So
less boring that way.
yeah. So stay tuned for the next medical videos we're going to be doing. But thank you guys for watching. Thank you, Mason, for doing this.
Great to come out.
Yeah. So stay tuned for those next videos. Thank you, guys.
Stay safe.